Good afternoon, folks. Thank you very much for coming. It's kind of a special day. We're going to do a couple of things here. One is we're going to pay tribute to an individual, and then we're going to also talk about geography. I'm Dr. Robert Kruse. I think you all know me, and I'm a professor of geography, and my specialty is social and cultural geography. So you'll be hearing about that. Thank you to our distinguished guests, Dr. Borchers, Dr. Conchar Farr, Betsy, Ginny, Dr. Harper, my good friend in political science. Yeah. Actually, this gentleman was a political scientist at West Liberty University. This picture is of Kenneth B. McMillan. And the reason I had big band music playing was that's the music he would have been listening to as a young man in World War II. After World War II, he came to work at West Liberty University between the years 1946 and 1985. Long time. And of course, I didn't know him, but what I've heard may be familiar to you. Now, you're all experienced college students, maybe a while ago, maybe current. And I went to college, and I know that some teachers that you have are fine. They're okay. You get through the semester, it's okay. Once in a while, you have a dud. You ever have one of those? It's like, oh my goodness. How long is the semester? Are you sure it's only 15 weeks? Because it feels like forever. Do you know what I mean? We don't have any of these at West Liberty University, no. But right, but you know what I mean. And then there are the professors who rock your world. These are people who grab onto your mind, shake it around, make it fun, make it scary, but they change things, right? They're exciting. And from what I've heard, this man was such a professor. Okay, he was a political science professor. And he's important today because of a fund that was established in his honor by members of his family, by colleagues, and by students who admired him. And this fund has grown into what's called the McMillan Endowed Chair, which is a fantastic opportunity established in the West Liberty Foundation. And what it does is it permits a professor to receive a modest stipend and time to produce academic work. Now, we all do it at West Liberty. It's part of being a professor. You teach, you do research, and you serve. Those three things. West Liberty's a great job, but it's a rigorous job. We teach four courses per semester. Some colleges, professors teach one or two a semester. So time is an issue in working on things in West Liberty. And so I've been privileged to be the first endowed chair and been afforded the time to do more research. In the time that of this year, I've done three projects which usually take me about 5 years. It's that big a deal. And the projects are around you, and I encourage you to take a look after we talk and take a look at sort of what we've been doing. They're centered around three themes, but all of them have to do with areas of interest to me. One is geography and economic development. The other is geography and the arts, specifically music. And the third is geographies and health or disability. These are longstanding interests of mine. And just really quickly, we're going to talk to you today in depth about this project. And one of the things I was able to do, having been funded in part by the endowed chair, is I was able to hire this gentleman, Sailor Thompson, who is heading out. He's graduating this semester, but it has been a joy to work with him. And I've thrown all kinds of stuff at him. When you're Dr. Kruse's research assistant, anything happens. And he's been great. He's rolled with everything. And it's been a privilege to work with you. But the project that we're going to talk about in detail has to do with a small town, maybe you've heard of it, called Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And we're going to talk about how it has undergone not just little changes, it's under an economic transformation. And we're going to talk about that because that's what we learned about when we went there. Over here, behind Sailor, we have another project that I worked on. This one conforms with geographies and music. And this one looks at the way that music and lyrics are used to produce narrative space. Narratives, the way space tells a story. Of a Broadway musical by Stephen Sondheim. And the musical is called Pacific Overtures. And it is a musical about the arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry to Japan in 1853. And that's when Japan moved out of a feudal era into interacting with the West. And so it's a musical all about that. And it's an unusual musical because it draws upon kabuki theater. It also it tips its hat to imperialism and all kinds of things going on with this. And the thing that interested me geographically about it was how the authors manipulate space on the stage, the geographies of the theater space. And so that's what that's about. Obviously, I can't perform the whole score for you, but I encourage you to look it up. It's called Pacific Overtures. And the third, I think unfortunately we all know people who have been stricken with cancer. And I felt that geography was a good way of trying to improve things for those people in terms of how spaces of treatment and spaces of recovery and spaces of therapy can be made better through the manipulation and understanding of spatial relationships of healthcare. So that's what that's about. 3 manuscripts heading out. My plan is to send them out early May, after finals. Thank you. But yeah, they'll be going out to 3 different journals, and we'll hope for the best. They always say something. They want you to fix it, but we're optimistic. So that's what this is about. Yeah, so Point Pleasant, West Virginia. How many of you are from West Virginia? A couple, huh? Well, do you know where Point Pleasant? You know where the Ohio River is, right? Western boundary. Well, you head south about 2 hours or so, and it's right on the Ohio River at the confluence of the Ohio and the Kanawha River. So that's where we're talking about. And this is an interesting project. When I got the opportunity to pursue it with the endowed chair, it was actually perfectly timed because a couple months earlier, I'd gotten an email from somebody I had never heard of who said, I read your 2015 article about Point Pleasant. They said, it was pretty good and you got some stuff right, but you got to come down and see us now because it's all different. So I was like, yeah, all right, whatever, I'm busy. And then I was a little less busy. So I headed down, and there was good reason to go down. It was a totally different story. So when I first did the 2015 article, it was a Geographies of Tourism article that had to do with how they balance heritage tourism, dark tourism, and paranormal tourism, how they use these 3 ways to draw people to the town in order to rejuvenate it economically. So what we did this semester, what Sarah and I did, is it's sort of a sequel to that project, okay? And we have a guiding question. You know, it helps when you're asking questions to have a framework. What are the social, cultural, and physical geographies that are contributing to the economic transformation of Point Pleasant and Mason County? What's going on, in other words, and how can we interpret this geographically? Do you know what that is? What is it? It's a Mothman, right. Anybody ever? I don't want to know. All right. So, you know, those of you who've had me for geography know that we have some themes in geography that sort of set up a framework for understanding things. We use concepts of location, place, human environment interaction, movement and mobility, and also we compare the characteristics of regions. So from these things we extract our framework, which is going to pay attention to the distribution of economic activities, the way in which land use changes to foster economic development, the socio-spatial factors of change, these have to do with behavior and culture, and finally, place perception. Point Pleasant has undergone a tremendous process of changing place perception. It's gone from very positive to very negative to very positive. It changes. It's not this constant static thing. So with that, I give you Sailor.
So what exactly is my job here as a research assistant? There's a lot going into it beforehand that I wasn't aware of, and I learned a lot as we kind of went through the process. But to start out with what we did archival research. This is where we read relevant literature, looked for relevant images, and we also searched for journals, books, websites that all pertained to the economic geographies of small towns. We then, after that, made a trip down to Point Pleasant ourselves to the Mothman Festival for field work. This is when we kind of interacted and got to understand the local culture a bit more, as well as collect information about how people change and act differently when they're in this festival environment versus the norm. On our second trip, we went and we did open-ended interviews with key members of the Point Pleasant community. This is where we compiled and kind of brainstormed a bunch of questions for them, as well as recording every interview word for word. On that second trip as well, we also went up to the TNT area and did more kind of general Point Pleasant field work. This is where we took pictures that you'll see a little bit later, like to reference in the journal as well as in this. We also interacted more with the locals and kind of got a bit more of the spoken kind of story of Point Pleasant. Once we returned to West Liv, the writing and poster presentation process began. This is where we pulled all the information from the previous steps together, as well as the images that we took, and put them together for this presentation as well as to write towards the journal. The draft of the paper section also began here. To finish this up, we're going to submit this to an academic journal, which is the Southeast Geographer. This is an academic journal that pertains to the southeastern region of the United States. But first, in the traditions of Ptolemy and other cartographers, we got to get our bearings a little bit. Down here is the key locations of the story of Point Pleasant. This is also where the Mothman Festival took place on Main Street. Here are some locations that you'll hear later. The Farmers Market, Tuendaway State Park, and if you look at this green line, this is the site of the Silver Bridge tragedy. If we zoom farther out to the region of the area, you'll see some future and current construction sites for the economy of the area, as well as the TNT area where the alleged sightings of the creature began. But for many places, the physical geography of Point Pleasant was significant in the past and is significant now. It's at the confluence of the Ohios and the Kanawha Rivers, as well as it's being located on the Allegheny Plateau. This gives it its human continental climate. The historical geography of the area is also significant as well. The Shawnee called it Tuendaway, which means the mingling of the rivers, the Ohio and the Kanawha. George Washington on our side referred to it as a pleasant point. In 1774, the Battle of Point Pleasant occurred here. Going forward a little bit to 94, is the town was authorized by the Virginia Assembly. Jumping further into the 1880s, it became the county seat of Mason County. 4 years later, the New York Central Railroad made its way here. Going to the 20th century kind of economic geographies of it, there's a lot going on. World War II munitions factory was built, coal-fired power plant, chemical production, manufacturing, and agriculture all dominated the area's economy. 1960s though, two strange events kind of ripped the town. In November of 1966, there were multiple sightings of a Mothman at the site of the World War II munitions factory, now called the TNT area. And a year after, the collapse of the Silver Bridge into the Ohio happened as well. This is what the kind of locals referred to as the dark years, starting to the 70s into the 80s. Economic decline occurred, out-migration of the working age population happened as well. And in 1975, a journalist, John Keel, published the book, The Mothman Prophecies.
So we're talking here about how a place goes from being an ordinary location to an extraordinary location. It's basically the route that we're taking here. And these two events of the 1960s weren't just confined to Point Pleasant. The collapse of the Silver Bridge, you got to imagine this. We're talking rush hour traffic and a bridge collapse with 40 cars dumped in the Ohio River. Tragic. It affected almost everybody in that town, and the town remembers. But that event also led to safety protocols that were enacted nationally for bridges. So that got Point Pleasant on the map. This Mothman business, this flying creature of whatever, it also made regional and national news. So we went from being a little town to that place, you see? And things really started to change in 2002. Because I mentioned this fellow, John Keel, was a journalist who went to Point Pleasant to write a book about the sightings of the Mothman. That becomes the basis of this. This is a feature film that starred Richard Gere. You probably know Richard Gere. And that got all kinds of national and international attention to Point Pleasant. Yeah, the funny thing is the film wasn't filmed in Point Pleasant. It was filmed in Kittanning, Pennsylvania, for reasons only the film industry could understand. But it still put it on the map because it was the location. But look what the town did in response. There were some insightful people who thought, you know, we can do something with this. So we'll have a festival. So they got some vendors together and they slapped the word Mothman on everything and people came. They came. Well, let's step it up. Charles Humphreys, local leader, decided to commission the creation of a statue downtown. So now there's this big statue of the Mothman right downtown. Now you would think people would be, oh great, this is going to put on something. There are some people who, oh, here we go. We're going to be the Mothman place forever. But Charles Humphreys and the economically minded of the community thought, well, you know, it's a small price to pay. So they have the statue. It developed into a festival that attracts 10,000 people. That's twice the population of the town. Okay, so folks come in, they do their Mothman stuff, they do the vendors and all that. But this also led to this. Television production companies coming in and wanting to film. One came in 2005, and 6 were there by 2015. Now, this is not just interesting, this is lucrative, because we're talking History Channel, we're talking National Geographic, we're talking free marketing. Other places can't compete with that. This is where Point Pleasant starts to pull away from its competing communities in terms of economic development. And insightfully, because if this had gotten messed up, it would have been a problem down the road. Insightfully, the leaders agreed, particularly this gentleman whom we interviewed at length, Denny Bellamy, they agreed we need to be careful with this. If this gets out of hand, we're going to be, you know, the Disneyfication of small town America, and we don't want that. So he had this interesting quote, you can make a television show here, but you have to make it in the way we want it made, because I can get you permission to do absolutely anything you want. I can hear him talking. He's got this really thick accent. Not only in our town, but in our county. That's the complete cooperation from all the police forces, shutting down the road. You want to film on? We've closed down Main Street and turned it into the 1960s. We'll give you everything you need. So he's going on, I'm listening. And I said, no hillbilly stuff? His face dropped. He said, oh, hell no. I touched a nerve there. He said, absolutely not. And then he, as if he were talking to a production company, you better do that where you're from, and then you'd better not come back. So they took this seriously, because sure, we'll compromise a bit with this Mothman association, but we don't want to be made fools of, and we don't want to reinforce some of the negative stereotypes of West Virginia. Okay, so the Mothman Association's picking up, but there's some challenges. You have to sort of make a Mothman landscape to make this work, because the Mothman was not sighted downtown, but that's where the festival is. The Mothman was sighted at a location about 2 miles north. So how do you get that to work? You have a bus tour, no problem. And a local entrepreneur did that. And so you go to the TNT area. Weird place, people, if you go down there. It is a desolate, overgrown, evidently contaminated area where you can fish all you want. It was a secret munitions factory during World War II. And there are these weird igloos, they're called, right? Invisible from the air in case of aerial bombardment, but they stored munitions there. I almost said musicians. They stored munitions there, maybe musicians too. I don't know, but they're creepy. But they have nothing to do with the Mothman, but if you're going to bring production companies in and you're going to have these stories, you got to show them something. So let's show them the creepy igloos and we'll Mothmanize them. So we're creating a Mothman landscape with this, basically. And this is wild. This is the area during World War II. It was super contaminated. It became a restoration project. And now with this nice, state parkish looking sign, it's a wildlife management area, which means don't drink the water. So we have a changing land use linking this to a Mothman landscape. You see what's going on here? Somebody stitched all this stuff together geographically. So if you go there, you should go into these igloos. You won't quite be the same afterwards. There is an entrance. It's overgrown. You walk in and your voice echoes, and it's creepy. Remember, the Mothman was never seen way here. But we needed creepy, and so this is creepy. Right? One of the biggest surprises to us, do you remember this? When they started talking about this, I remember looking at them going, we just struck gold, because they were talking about the benefits of the pandemic. I had not heard anything like we're rolling off, masks and vaccinations and classes online and all this. No, they were saying, no, actually it was great. Let me explain. First of all, the Mothman Festival was closed down for a couple of years, but they were able to attract people who had come to it before to come back to Point Pleasant. So they're getting repeat visitors. Well, when people come, they stay places, they eat and all of that stuff. So they got increased traffic. And although their indoor attractions were kind of off limits, the town took the opportunity to build more outdoor attractions like trails and bike trails and stuff like that. And they rejuvenated some of their parks. And during this process, there's the Mothman statue with a mask on. Do you see? These people are good at capitalizing on things. But the thing about it that was sort of amazing was the stores were getting 200 to 300 people downtown every weekend. This was huge. So you can start to connect the dots and see what's going on. The pandemic also foreshadowed some other things. It provided the American Rescue Plan, the federal stimulus plan that was based on needs from the pandemic. It allowed for the funding of an increased water treatment facility. That's actually a really big deal because down the road, it's going to attract businesses, industries. So the pandemic was great in that regard also. Not to make light of it, but it's ironic as all get out. And so you begin to see an integration of social media presence, and Chris Reiser, the leader of an organization called Main Street Point Pleasant, which is in charge of sort of coordinating merchants and raising the profile of downtown. And he's got, like, this quote is from his website: "Change is here and Mason County's future is bright." And they started to get more and more businesses opening up. And the reason for that was the attendance at the Mothman Festival and the visits related to it had increased to a point where the locals didn't have to support the businesses as much because it could keep a store going for most of the year, which is fabulous when you think about it. And so, you can see what the quote was there. So this is really big. Now, this Mothman Festival, I kind of think of myself as a pretty mild-mannered kind of person. Usually don't dress up in costume in public places, occasionally, but nothing I want to talk about. But the Mothman Festival is a transformed environment where the social norms are suspended temporarily, almost like a Mardi Gras kind of thing. You understand? How many of you have been there? Anybody been to the Moth? Really? Okay, well, tell them Dr. Kruse sent you. Take it away.
The Mothman Festival of 2023, when we went, it was a much larger crowd than any of the ones mentioned previously. This is where a bunch of people were participating in cosplay, which is where dressing up in costume and putting on a different kind of persona using either homemade items or items for purchase, outfits that you can buy there, brought from home. There was also influence from the video game Fallout 76. This was released in 2018, and there was some stuff there referencing the video game. There were people that came because, oh, they saw it in the game, they saw Mothman and they were interested. At the festival as well, even if it was just Mothman Festival, there's a large diversity of different cryptids, Bigfoot, things like that. It became more integrated with other attractions as well. This included the uniformed park ranger at the Two Indaway State Park. You walk down from Main Street down to the park and back. This all creates a transitory topography. It transforms the places into festival space that impact selling that place to the wider world, and selling the festival as an inseparable part of that place. So, some pictures of the Mothman Festival. On the left is, as we've talked about, the statue, the Mothman statue. In the center is a bit of cosplay as well as a kid posing for a photo with him. And then on the right is a gigantuan Michelin Man, Stay Puft guy from the Ghostbusters movie, and some peoples for scale at the bottom. Then going down to the state park, as well as referencing the memorials, on the left and right is the plaque for the Silver Bridge Memorial, and on the right is the mural of it. That would be where the bridge would have been if it was still standing. In the center is us taking a picture with the, that state park warden man. We all dressed up in his costume in a way for this event. Cryptids, as well as everybody else there, need services as well. There are vendors. There is also, a bathroom. Cryptids need to use it as well, so why not market it as a little bit of the fun of the festival. There were also things that were interesting and kind of against what you would think going to a monster festival. In the center here, we have the cutification of these monsters. This is where, the Mothman creature, the beast, is just a cute little guy on a sticker that you could buy for your car. As well as the juxtaposition between a Bible store selling Mothman merchandise and monster-related memorabilia. Things like that that kind of, you don't think of when you go there, but you see it, and it's a part of the whole festival event. It wasn't just the festival proper that was getting in on the kind of Mothman identity either. We have in the center here a car wash. That's the Mothman car wash. No connection to the Mothman, or I don't believe he was sighted there using it, but it's still kind of a part of the whole show. If you drive by, oh, use the car wash. Going out down to the kind of connection of the river down to the riverfront, it's where they had their music of kind of local bands and then country music and things like that, as using this space as kind of a gathering point, as well as some more kind of cutification, little expansion of cryptids with aliens. So this changes the perception of the landscape.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you see what's happening here. You start to connect these. Things are compounding on other things. Some of them are kind of ordinary things that small towns go through, but also some of them are extraordinary and make Point Pleasant stand out. You're getting a revitalized downtown that's built upon the success of the Mothman Festival, but it's moving away from dependence on it. You see that? It's like a what do you call it? Like a springboard. And around the same time, they got a new high school athletic complex. They kept redoing their parks, so it's creating a lot of energy, a lot of creative energy in the community. And the community's sort of getting back to the good old days that the residents remember. A community that was tight-knit, that was a safe place to play. You ride your bike in the street, all these sort of iconic images of childhood. A Mayberry-ish, for those of you who might know the Andy Griffith Show from the 60s. It was a very romanticized view of a small town. But this is a big deal because, well, people were looking. They were looking in from the outside. We still got the river location, right? You've got the confluence of the Ohio and the Canal, but now you've got a community that might actually be able to retain workers because they would want to live there. That got the attention of 3 new industries that are moving in as we speak. This is extraordinary. A company called Nucor is a scrap metal recycler. What's the cheapest way to move heavy stuff, people? It's on the river, right? So we're going to be moving things around, and that's going to create 800 new permanent jobs in addition to the construction jobs. Frontieris has to do with energy production. 500 new permanent jobs, not counting the construction jobs. And Fidelis New Energy, also energy related, 800 new jobs. And part of the reason that these places were drawn to the area had to do with it looked like a nice place, you know? We're going back to George. It seemed like a pleasant point. It's returned to a pleasant point. This is what we're talking about. Now, that means that other people pay attention. Now that you've got the industrial interest, the industries moving in, now you've got funders willing to play ball with you more because you've got major industries coming in, and it makes sense. So you can get that kind of sort of capitalization on these things. One of the things that Mr. Reiser was very excited about was the reinvention of the local farmers market. It was moved from a location that was underneath and tucked away in one of the bridges. He wanted to move it right down by the waterfront and have a pavilion built, but he needed money to do it. Well, in his application, I believe it was a federal application, he was able to talk about the new industries coming in. And you see how all this stuff is sort of, you know, dovetailing. And so they were extremely excited about that. What does this mean? Well, it means most likely you're going to get a lot of in-migration of workers from other regions, other states. Those people are going to need to live somewhere. They're going to need to buy stuff. And all of this is expected to amount to a tripling of the area's population in 10 years. A tripling of the population. Wow. And the industries are interested in forging long-term relationships. They're promising to be good partners, to become part of the community and help build it. And that means the leaders are dreaming again about what's possible. And so it's an amazing time. One of the things that Saylor and I were really interested in, how do these people work together? This small town. I mean, is it like turf wars or fussiness, or is everybody always smiling? Well, it turns out it's a very modest operation. For example, Denny Bellamy and Chris Reiser, we actually interviewed them in this building, which is a former Wendy's. Right, it's now the Mason County Tourism and Welcoming Center. It's a former Wendy's they rent from the state for $1, literally. So you don't have to be fancy. But they coordinate the arrival of different kinds of tours because it's a river town. They still have riverboat tours and stuff like that. They work together on the festival. But their economy's moving away from special events to something that's on a more solid foundation. And it does go back to our Mothman, right? So it's limited resources, cooperation, and also there's another thing going on too. There's the influx of younger creative energy into the local leadership. And we interviewed a lifelong resident about what her perceptions were of what was going on. And she spoke very highly of the mayor, Mayor Amber Tatterson. She said, well, she's a young person. I just think that a younger person's view is totally different than my generation. I think that one good thing about younger leaders is that they have a bigger view of what is possible. From her perspective, this was a shift in how to approach things. But especially in West Virginia, we also value the perspectives of people who stay in place, who have a deep connection to where they're from. You may know what I'm talking about if you live in a town that your grandparents also live in, that sort of thing. It's extremely important in West Virginia. So Denny Bellamy, the Convention and Visitors Bureau director, he remembers all this stuff. He remembers the falling of the bridge. He remembers the Mothman. He lived next door. John Keel, the guy who wrote the book, he visited the town. Everybody remembered that, and they were supposed to stay away from him because he was thought to be weird. You know? And so combining the new stuff with him, when he retires, which is going to happen in a year or two, they're going to lose some timeline here, some memory. So they're going to have to figure out how to keep that going as their population triples. So what did we find as a result of this? Well, Point Pleasant has been good at capitalizing on its geographical location. Its geographical location is its reason for being. But because of what happened in the 20th century, its geographical location wouldn't sustain it because of the dark years. Leaders in Point Pleasant have benefited from things that they could control and also things that they haven't been able to control, but they figured out how to use both things. They've been able to learn how to respond to surprises and make use of them, hence the pandemic. Land use changes. You know, a lot of this area was agricultural area, and then you've got Nucor coming in, flattening the place and building something. And they're also going to build a barge depot on the river to service that, so the river still plays importantly. So we tracked those kinds of things. The growth of the Mothman Festival in the town no longer relies on it, but it has gotten this momentum going that seems unstoppable at the moment. It was the re-Mayberrying of the town that helped to attract these industries, who could have gone to a lot of river towns in the United States. Local leadership combines youth and also the experience of people who've been there a long time, and they have found a way not to be at odds. Everybody gets fussy about stuff sometimes, but they find a way to navigate through this and maximize. These people are excellent maximizers. They use this low-cost promotional options through social media, and they're really good at integrating those. And what we found was there are things that can be learned from Point Pleasant that are interesting and unique to Point Pleasant. Makes a good story. But more importantly, there are things that we learned that could be transferred to other small towns trying to figure out how to revitalize themselves. And so that's what we hope will result from this project as it, gets published. So thank you. It's been really great. Thanks for coming, and many thanks to my wife, Tammy. If anything looks graceful and dignified, it's because of her. The food and all of that. We stayed up late last night talking in the kitchen, and then I kind of went to bed, and she stayed up and finished it all. But thank you. Thanks to the geography students. Shameless promotion here. I'm sure there are those of you who are very happy with your majors, and I applaud that. There are people who might be on their second, third, fourth majors, or just feel that their major is not a good fit right now. If that's true, come see us, because if this is of interest to you, it's only half of geography, because we also do stuff like sustainability. Maybe you've heard about that today. We also do things that have to do with maps. We also do things that have to do with natural resources. And my colleague, Professor Massey, rocks the other side of things. So if you're of interest and you're not graduating, or if you are, it's good. But if you're not, then come see us if we can help you. Okay? Thanks very much.